Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Villanova Basketball Report. It's live here on BLS. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, and Kevin Long alongside here for what should be a great evening of basketball talk here, guys, because Villanova has their biggest matchup of the season upcoming, a conference tilt against number 10 Xavier. It's a top 10 matchup right here in Philadelphia, and Villanova assumes their spot at number 1 in their country, the 15th week they've done it in the last 3 years. Really, when you take a look back, guys, at where this program has been and some of the heights it has achieved, this, as much as anything, is a definition and an explanation for the type of success that this program has had that really this city has never seen before. You think of the Temple days where they had about a month or two at number 1. This is unprecedented in terms of a proud basketball town in Philadelphia and success at the college level.
For sure, a model of consistency, the Villanova Wildcats, and it's, like you said, something we haven't seen in the city in a long time. As a Philadelphia sports guy, you could say the Philadelphia Eagles in the early thousands were pretty consistent every year at the top of the NFC, and it's fun. It's fun, and you really feel like the city has become a much bigger fan base for Villanova and very supportive. A lot of people in the Philadelphia area over the past few years. National championship doesn't hurt, but it's a fun time to be a Wildcat fan.
Yeah, and definitely something that we haven't seen recently. I mean, it seems like almost yesterday that Villanova was number 1 in the country for the first time. I think that was 3 years ago now, and now being at the top for 15 weeks out of those past 3 years, definitely come a long way. Speaks a lot to the recruiting that they've done in this area. They're really dominating the Philadelphia area, and it shows because they have a lot more depth than they used to have in recent years.
Shameless plug here when it comes to high school sports, of course, but when you talk about programs and those programs that have done really well in recent years, a lot of times it has to do with the local talent. So while Villanova is mining very good talent in Philadelphia, you're not having to go as deep into said mines to find these talents. I mean, these guys are jumping off the page at you. Colin Gillespie, a guy who had a phenomenal senior year after he was getting low D1 and some D2 looks going into his senior year, had a phenomenal senior year and really was the best player in all of Philadelphia. Demir Cosby Roundtree is one of the most athletic big guys that we've seen. He still has to go a little bit of a ways offensively developing, but I don't think anybody doubts that can be done. And then guys that haven't come to Villanova, Cam Reddish going to Duke next year, it would appear, and Mo Bamba, who's a one and done most likely at Texas, as well as Lonnie Walker, who's down at Miami. I mean, the talent in Philadelphia is as good as it's been in a long, long time, and Villanova is reaping some benefits there.
For sure, and like you both have touched on, and we've touched in the past few weeks, how Villanova has really done a great job recruiting local kids. The bread and butter, has been for years the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast corridor, and it's great, like you said, to have those Philadelphia Catholic League stars coming out to the main line. And I think it makes it more exciting, for sure. I think, people, especially, the fans from the area relate to these Catholic League stars that they watch. They see in the Inquirer, the write-ups, and they're following them on Bob Long Sports. And it makes it a lot more fun, and I think a lot more rewarding when you do it with local kids. And, you saw it with Archidiacono, how much it meant to him to be a part of the Villanova program. So kids who have grown up in the area, probably grown up watching a lot of Wildcat basketball, probably big fans, and it makes it that much more special when they succeed.
Yeah, these kids are coming out here. They're playing with that Philly pride. Everyone wants to play for Villanova. If you're from Philadelphia, that's the goal. Whether you're from Archbishop Wood or Newman Goretti or Langhorne like Archie. Everyone wants to play for Villanova if you're in the area. That's the last step before NBA for some of these guys in their career goals. And it's really a good position for this Villanova program to be in right now.
McHale, Great Valley High School out there in Malvern. Yep, lots of local talent. And the local talent's going to be on display as they take on the Xavier Musketeers. And well, they know a thing or two about local talent, procuring guys like J.P. McCure and some of the other great players that have come through Xavier and Cincinnati, for that matter. It's really a proud city with good high school athletics, and that Musketeers team has taken that step up as it's moved into the Big East over the last 4 or 5 years and has become we'll call it a traditional new Big East power. in that every single year you know they're going to be up there in the top 3, in the top 4, in the NCAA tournament. They haven't quite made that run that they have wanted to yet, except for, well, their best run came when they were an 11 seed. But now, this team led by Chris Mack, who's one of the most stable, steady-as-he-go type coaches, is coming to Philadelphia in a rivalry that's been unbelievable. You think back to two years ago now, I believe, when Villanova came into the Cintas Center as the number 1 team in the country. Xavier was the 5th-rated team in the country. And the Musketeers came away with a victory there after Villanova earlier in the year had just trounced them at the Pavilion. So this has become...
Was that the first time Xavier beat Villanova? I believe it was that... when they upset the Cats when the Cats were number 1.
I was told that trivia would come later in the show.
Fair enough. All right,
trivia will come later in the show, by the way. That's what's called a tease here in the biz. But I don't know. I think it was the best time that the first time that Villanova had been beaten by Xavier. But it's a great program. They've given them challenges in the past, and the rivalry has certainly become a good one in the Big East. So let's get a thought for tomorrow night. It's a top 10 matchup in the city of Philadelphia for all the people watching out there. Go. I mean, you have an opportunity to go watch 2 of the best teams in the country and some of the best talent in all of college basketball. I mean, get out there.
Definitely. And it's going to be, I think, probably the most exciting game in the Wells Fargo Center this season. I mean, for sure. There isn't a big marquee non-conference game. There wasn't a big marquee non-conference game this year in the Wells Fargo Center. No Virginia, no Syracuse, anything like that. I mean, this is the game. Usually they've been, the past few years they've played Xavier at the Pavilion on campus, and this is the first time you got Xavier in the Wells Fargo Center. It's going to be a huge crowd. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, this is going to be a great matchup here. A lot of people think Xavier last year, an 11 seed, wow, Cinderella story, coming up, getting better this year. But, this was a team that was in the top 10, top 25 all year last year, top 10 a lot last year. This is a very experienced team, probably one of the best backcourt duos in all of college basketball, Trayvon Blewett and JP McCura. This is going to be a great test for Villanova, really see where they are. And this will be probably one of their first big tests of the year to see where they're going to be around March.
Trayvon Blewett is just one of the best scorers in all of college basketball, and he's a guy that's been doing it for a couple of years now. Came in, contributed his freshman year, and now here he is going through his last go-round and just tearing things up. I mean, he's a guy that is going to come out there and provide matchup problems to whoever covers him, right? I mean, Jalen Brunson, Phil Booth are good defenders, but at some point it may be where you put, and this may sound a little crazy, but you put your best defender on Trayvon Blewett and you get length in the form of Dante DiVincenzo or even McHale Bridges on him because he's the guy you need to stop. And then McCura, I'm glad you brought him up, Kev, because he just does so many good things in that he can take you off the bounce even though you wouldn't expect it. Obviously, he can knock it down from 3. But really an underrated portion of his game, and he's improved this so much over the last 2 years, he can finish at the hoop now. He's a guy that'll hit the contested shot in the lane. He'll get it high off the glass. He loves the contact. I mean, he's the definition of a Cincinnati, of a Xavier-type basketball player. And those 2 in the backcourt are going to give Villanova some trouble tomorrow.
Yeah, he's a kid that backs down to nobody. And another thing that he's improved greatly in his past 2-3 years is his defense. He can match up against anybody, 6'5", 6'6", guard. He's got the quickness. And Trayvon Blewett, like you were talking about earlier, the big thing with him is the quickness. You got to find someone that can keep up with him. Maybe McHale can. Obviously, his length will help him out, but Dante's going to have to be the guy that can lock down on him. He's got the combination of quickness and size to keep up with Trayvon Blewett. So I'm definitely looking forward to that matchup tomorrow night.
Right, and Kevin, you mentioned that run in the tournament last year and that team that people forgot was ranked, early on in the season, and you forget how many injuries they went through. They had the issues with Miles Davis off the court, so they had a lot of things going on for that program most of the season last year, especially through Big East play. So, and they were finally one coherent, full team,
right,
and showed what they were capable of in the tournament last
and
year.
you remember the year before that, they were a 2 seed with the Twin Towers down low of Farr and Reynolds, with Sumner as well. I mean, that was a phenomenal team 2 years ago that was beaten by a buzzer-beating three from Bronson Koenig, who, if I think now we've seen enough of him to know that he can hit a big shot now and again. A phenomenal Wisconsin team, obviously, that made runs of their own. So, I mean, this is a consistent program. I think most people that are watching this program know that that's a consistent program, but it's just to put it into perspective, a night before the game, this is as good as it gets in the Big East for any program not known as Villanova, or maybe even including Villanova from a consistency perspective. They just haven't quite gotten to that same apex yet that Villanova. But in terms of Chris Mack, I mean, the longer they keep him around, the better. And as long as he stays at that program, that's going to be a consistent power in the Big East. So, prediction time. I mean, what do you think? What's your thoughts? And we can get audience thoughts on this as well, whether you want to give a score prediction or a key, or heck, what you saw last week as Villanova beat Marquette 190 at the Wells Fargo Center. What's on your mind about Villanova basketball or anything else in hoops or college sports in general? And we'll get to it over the course of the show. But thoughts on the game and maybe some predictions.
Yeah, so my first concern for this game is Villanova's defense. Last week, giving up 100 points to Butler, 90 points to Marquette. This is not the typical Villanova defense that we're used to. And, you have a really good Xavier team coming in here, playing well. Trayvon Blewett, JP McHale, you really need to find a way to stop those two. So if we're able to limit those two guys to, 30, 35 points combined, we're going to have a really good shot to win this game. But my fear is that Villanova's shortcomings on defense recently are going to come back to bite them in this game. And so that's what I'm looking for, the Villanova defense in this matchup.
I completely agree. Defense is the key. This Villanova, if there's one problem this Villanova team hasn't had, that's offense. We know they can score the basketball. Xavier's defense has never been phenomenal. They mix things up well. They throw that odd 1-3-1 zone at you every so often, but their offense won't be, probably. I'd be surprised if it was a problem for the Cats tomorrow night. Defense, as you said. I mean, the Cats are giving up. This is the first time I read, and I fact-checked it. I read it on an ESPN article that said this is their worst defensive efficiency rating since 2011. That was actually incorrect. It was since 2012, but team that didn't make the tournament, pretty rough year. But this is the first time since then that they've been ranked outside the top 30 in defensive efficiency rating. So this is a new problem for Villanova. I mean, I think in years past we've complained about some offensive issues, but defense has never really been a problem with that, outside of getting used to the 2-3 zone. But yeah,
that's your favorite.
That's
your
my favorite. Hey, I saw they were working at it again the other night against Marquette. Actually looked pretty good.
Was Painter in the game?
Painter was not in the game. Your favorite player, Bob. He was not in the game. But yeah, I completely agree. Shutting down Blewett, shutting down McHale defensively, and he said, who do you put on Trayvon Blewett? And that's tough because one of the flaws defensively, I mean, I see a few things. They're flaws for this year, and it's been transition defense. I mean, you love the effort. The effort's not the issue. The effort, it's actually too much at times. Over pursuing the basketball, not switching on every screen. I'm sorry, which causes confusion and then also makes you soft in a way. Switching on every screen. I mean, I know Jay prides his teams on being able. Anybody can guard anybody, right? Mm-hmm. That's the style of the four guard team, but. Yeah, another problem with Blewett, especially, you have to look out for has been on the ball defense. McHale, as you said, is the guy where you'd immediately, I would have to say, has to be guarding Trayvon Blewett. But otherwise, a lot of the other Wildcats this year have been very susceptible on the ball defense.
Mm-hmm. I don't actually think I see McHale happening. I mentioned it as something that if you really want to get your best defender on him and put the length there, you talk about on the ball defense, right? If somebody gets beat to the hoop, McHale is probably less likely to get beaten to the hoop, right. But if he does, he can still chase you down from behind because of that length. But at that point, I think you struggle because then how do you match up against the rest of the Xavier offense? And from that standpoint, I actually don't think we're going to see him, but I think it's if he has 15 points in the first 10 minutes or something like that, and you need to pull the ace in the hole, a.k.a. Alabama, and putting Tua in the game last night, maybe that's something you see. I highly, highly doubt that they come out in that look.
So you think they'd start with Phil or Jalen?
Yeah, I'll say I bet
okay.
they put Jalen on him to start.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think you see how that goes because obviously Jalen and Phil, they provide their own matchup problems as well offensively. They're phenomenal players. So I think you just feel it out and you see how it goes in the first 10 minutes. But come out, we'll say fairly chalk, if you will, what you might expect, size on size, little on little, and just see who wins. 2 All-America candidates against one another.
And I'm sorry, I don't think either one of us gave you a prediction.
No.
I'll give a.
We don't follow instructions very well.
I'll give you mine. I think it's going to be a great game. Wells Fargo games are always tricky in my mind to predict. I mean, this is our home court this year, so it's odd saying that, but they're always tricky to predict. I'm always more confident in the Pavilion. With that said, it's going to be a shootout. I don't know how it couldn't be. Villanova gives up almost 70 points per game, and Xavier gives up more than 70 points per game, and they both score 85 plus per game. So it's going to be a shootout. I'd go somewhere around Villanova 95, Xavier 90, something almost similar to what we saw against Marquette.
I'm pretty sure that was the final score. Was that the final score of that game at the Cintas Center with Xavier on top 2 years ago?
Not sure, but I believe that was also a shootout.
I was told trivia would come later in the show. Sorry, guys. Kevin?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Tom. I'm going to say it's going to be slightly lower scoring than that. Maybe 88, 84 Villanova. I still think they come away with this win. Defense going to be a problem for both teams. It's just Jalen's a lot to handle for Xavier as well. I haven't played as well on defense as they would like to. Obviously we talked about Villanova struggling. Villanova is going to look to get the ball to some of the guys who have been struggling on their offense as well recently. Omari Spellman, not a great week last week, as well as Phil Booth. Look to get those guys involved early, get them going. As long as we can get those 2 guys back into the groove, I think they'll have a lot of success tomorrow night.
All right, so I just got done talking about how Xavier is this phenomenal team with this unbelievable talent, which they are and they do. This is a team that barely beat East Tennessee State. This is a team that struggled, and this is a line that, if I understand correctly, came out at 9, which tells me that Vegas is telling us something. And so I think the tendency would be to look really hard at Villanova and say that they've struggled, which they have. But I think you get a little bit of an extended break here. Not extended in that Saturday night to Wednesday night, but I'm saying from just before New Year's, where you had 3 games in 8 or 9, 8 days, something to that extent, and then you took a week off. You played Marquette. You stay home. Classes are about to begin, and now you're focused. I think I wouldn't say run them out of the building, but I think it's a 15-point win for Villanova tomorrow. I think it's a Xavier team that's also not quite clicked yet. And I think it'll happen at some point, but I think Villanova wins this game fairly handily, covers the spread relatively easily.
I like it. I hope to see it tomorrow night.
Yeah, I hope you're right.
Great.
I mean, it'd be nice on the blood pressure and the heart too to have a nice breeze of a game. But yeah, I think it could go either way. Like I said, shooting in the Wells Fargo Center is always tricky.
Can I ask you something about
sure.
that? Because what you said really tricked something in my brain. Because you said that you feel more confident when they're at the Pavilion versus the Wells Fargo Center. In overtime, 100%. I would absolutely agree. I just want to see if we can, whether it's putting a proportion on it or trying to evaluate the depth of that statement. Is that because of some shooting struggle? And this is for an analytics major out there. Go ahead and call those numbers over the last 15 years at the Wells Fargo Center versus the Pavilion. Or is it that because you have a 20,000-seat stadium, you're always getting the best teams to come to the Wells Fargo Center? That's a big thing that drove their huge Pavilion winning streak because, nobody better than the 25th, say, ranked team in the country would ever come to the Pavilion. So is it really that, hey, they shoot at the Pavilion rims more? I'm sure there's a little something to that. Or is it simply the level of competition that they play in South Philadelphia versus what they've traditionally played on the main line?
Well, do you mean historically, or do you mean just?
Let's talk in the Jay Wright era.
In the Jay Wright era, I see what you're saying in the old Big East. That's what I was asking. Because in the old Big East, yes, the marquee games, the Notre Dames, Syracuse, UConn, Louisville games
Sure.
at Wells Fargo Center. That completely makes sense. In the new Big East, it's been Georgetown, St. John's, Marquette, and then a
Virginia.
non-conference game.
Yeah.
Right. So in the new Big East, actually, their best games in conference have been at the Pavilion. Where
Creighton has
they've risen
played
to the
well.
occasion.
They played Creighton
Right.
at Wells Fargo Center when
Right.
they were very good.
Right, they did. And Creighton shot the lights out.
They
that
did.
night.
Ethan Rogge
Ethan Rogge.
dropping
that's
bombs.
Right. Yeah. Trailing and spotting up from almost 30 feet, it seemed like.
That game, by the way, where they hit their first 9 threes of the night, were up 27-8 just after the first media timeout. Went back and watched those 9 threes that Rogge hit over the course of the first half, and our boy Bill Raftery, right? Gus is just losing his mind with every three, and what's Raft doing? He is just laughing. Maybe I may have even brought this up on an earlier show. He's just sitting there laughing. Like, what is going on here? So obviously that's a little bit of an outlier, but I just think it's worth bringing up because I think it's an assumed fact, supposition, if you will, and I think it might inquire or require further depth just to see over time, is the shooting percentage markedly different? Can you adjust those using the KenPom defensive ratings of the teams that you played? Because, yeah, your shooting percentage might be a little bit less, but you're playing better teams, presumably better defensive teams. Could that be the statistical variance that you see? Just worth throwing out there. Anything?
I kind of agree with you, Bob. I see what you're saying, absolutely. I've thought about that. Over the past 5 or so years, they've been playing more and more games at the Wells Fargo Center. It does seem, it's a little different with the new Big East. I'll give you that. Not the Louisvilles and the UConns of the world playing at the Wells Fargo. Sometimes you'll have a Xavier game at the Pavilion like they had 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You have Butlers of the world come in here, but I would agree with you in the fact that the best Big East games are played at the Wells Fargo Center, and I think that's the bigger reason why they have more of an advantage at the Pavilion. I don't think it's necessarily they play better at the Pavilion.
Well, I think they started out having Georgetown, St. John's, Marquette games at Wells Fargo because that was like the traditional Big East.
Marquette, traditional,
Marquette,
quote
yes.
unquote, yeah.
Marquette,
Right,
St.
yeah.
John's and Georgetown for sure. And then Marquette, your old Big East rivals from the old Big East, but with Xavier and Seton Hall, and Butler, Creighton rising to the top, all of a sudden those are the best games. And I think this is the first time they're playing Xavier.
Yes.
At the Wells Fargo.
Yep.
Have they played Butler?
They have not played
think
Butler.
they've
They've
played
played
Butler.
Creighton. They have not played Seton Hall, to
No.
my
They've
recollection.
played Providence.
Yep, Providence is also always on the schedule there, just about. Providence has been a very good team, too. Kind of the forgotten team, it feels like, this year in the Big East.
Yeah, and they speaking of Providence, speaking of Xavier, I should say Providence. That's the last game Xavier played, and
Right.
the last loss they have. So Providence is a team that's always, Ed Cooley always has his teams prepared. That's always a game that you're never happy to see on the schedule, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always scared of Providence, but you also know in the same breath, Providence will lose a lot of games that they should not also. One of those teams that's always there ready to rise to the challenge when they play a team like Nova or Xavier. And then, once in a while you get those non-conference games. Doesn't mean so much. Sometimes they don't show up to play, but always still a scary team.
Taking picks here, we have Anthony texting in with an 81-71 score for Villanova. Always good for Anthony to have a comment, even though he's a big Syracuse Orange fan, which, of course, we're keeping up with your boys this year, and you've had a couple of nice matchups, especially the old school Syracuse-Georgetown rivalry. We certainly are disappointed that Villanova still isn't playing Syracuse. It's a great rivalry, and hope that they will continue that on. Again, taking scores for the Villanova Xavier game tomorrow night, 8 o'clock at the Wells Fargo Center. And, Tom, I think you might have our next agenda item ready for us, as well as we transition here on the Villanova Basketball Report.
Before we get into Villanova's biggest Big East matchup of the year thus far, I have a trivia question. If you remember last time on the show, we did nicknames that don't end in S, and I think that was a bit of a rout where Bob won that pretty handily.
Oh man, really? Should we check the tape?
I don't remember.
I think
I don't
Kevin
recall.
would rather not. So the question for tonight.
All right, let's hear it.
So we've played 4 Big East seasons. We know that
Okay.
Villanova has won each Big East regular season. However, there have been 4 different teams to finish in second place. Can you recall those 4 teams and in order, starting with
Oh,
2013-2014?
Order.
wow. Can I get some paper?
Here you
Man, All right, so how much time do we have?
go on there. Well, last week,
Oh, I already started.
Last
I'll
week
stop.
Go for it.
Yeah.
You're good.
All right.
last time we gave you 30 seconds. This week will be a little bit more generous.
How many teams have done it? 4 in how many
4.
years? In 5
4 and
years?
4.
4 and 4.
Yes. 4 and 4.
So 4 different teams.
4 different teams every year. Yep.
Hmm.
All right.
Oh man,
Hold up. Hold up.
what's
Let me
wrong?
Let me start the clock.
Oh, I thought we
Let's
were
start.
well started.
Here we go. So 13. Ready? I'll give you.
Yeah.
I'll give you 30 seconds again.
All right, hit it.
No. Ready?
Hit it.
Set. Go.
4 teams that have finished
4
in
different
second
teams. Yep.
place. Man, you got to do it in order. That's the really tough part, man. Yeah. 5 seconds.
Give you an extra 5.
All right, I'm running out here.
5, 4, 3. Put something down.
So much
2,
pressure here.
1.5. 1.
I know this isn't even right.
It's definitely not right. I don't know about yours. Mine is not.
All right.
All right, I'll go first. So the first year of the Big East, I put Creighton, then Providence, then Seton Hall, then Xavier last year. No, that's wrong. Xavier 2 years ago, Seton Hall last year. Sorry.
All right, my picks were Creighton 13, Seton Hall 2014, Xavier 15, Providence 2016.
All right. Based on my count, it looks like.
The other way around. What I said was the other way around. Creighton,
Let's
Providence, Xavier, Seton Hall.
Xavier Seton Hall. All right. So you both had the same years correct and the same years wrong.
Can
It
I
was-
guess what was wrong?
Sure.
Or right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet we got 13 and 15 right.
Got 13 and 15 right. Yep. 14 and 16. Just
Yeah.
last year, guys.
Right.
I had a
Butler.
mental block.
I don't know.
Butler.
Yeah.
Butler.
Butler last year. And 14's a bit of a surprise. It was a tie that year, but the team that officially finished second.
I don't know. Who have we not said? Marquette?
Believe it or not, it was the Georgetown Hoyas.
Wow,
12
that
and-
no chance.
at 12
Never
and
would've
6.
gotten it.
12
Great
and
year.
6 tied with the Butler Bulldogs.
Great
and
year for him.
Finished second, yeah.
Wow.
They made the tournament
So
that
the
year?
Cats ran. I'm not sure about that, but the Cats. but I'm sure that the Cats ran away with the regular season Big East
I would
crown
agree
that
with
year.
that.
Yeah, I would say so.
Winning
That's a
by
great
4
question.
games.
Oh,
There you go.
good trivia.
All right, what else you got for us?
That was
Yeah,
a tie
right.
this year. So it's been a while. It's been a while, guys. But
Yes.
do we remember the picks from the last show?
Oh,
In case you
all
don't, I have 'em here.
3 of our picks.
Where'd you
I
put that
do
paper?
not recall the picks. No,
Oh, we got it here. Hiding it.
I remember
He's
Bob
hiding,
beat
he's
me
hiding it
in
because he's
rock, paper,
behind.
scissors, but
Putting it in his rear view mirror. So, last time on the show in our Bob Long Brothers season-long Pick'em Challenge, we entered the week after week 1 with Kevin with a 33 to 13 point lead.
That's also the Pitt versus Penn State final score this year, for whatever that's worth.
There you go, just like
All
beating
right,
Akron.
everybody.
All right.
All right, great.
So, we got so both brothers picked Creighton to cover UT Arlington at a -9 favored.
Feels
Creighton
like it was a
spread.
bad idea.
Final score was 90 to 81 in favor of Creighton, so that was even for you guys. All right. And then
Beautiful. We were right on the money. What do we get for that?
and then, nada. And then we had a rock, paper, scissors, shoot contest because you both had picked Syracuse and Buffalo. Unfortunately for Bob, he won the rock, paper, scissors, shoot contest because Syracuse with a 11 came in the game minus 11 and only won by a score of 81-74, giving Bob negative 4 points.
Piling on Anthony here. He says they're struggling with UVA right now. I wish I had that result before I had to pick what happened against Buffalo.
And then Bob's third and final game was Gonzaga to cover the spread over San Diego State. That was a 5.5-point spread. And the Aztecs defeated the Zags 72-70.
That's rough there, Bob.
Since it was an upset, extra negative 10 points.
Is that a negative total
Negative
for the year?
17.5. And yes,
What do you
Kevin,
want from me?
Some better
Kevin.
picks.
As Kevin already said, Bob is negative now, total in the season, negative 8.5 points.
Oof.
So I guess it can only go up from there, one would hope. So Kevin, his two picks that were different from Bob, he picked Wake Forest to cover a 4-point spread over Coastal Carolina. That actually broke even as Wake won 84-80. And then he had Arizona to cover the spread against UConn. That was a 15.5-point spread, and Arizona ended up winning by 15 points, 73-58, so negative 0.5. So you both had negative scores for the week. However, we are now through 2 weeks of picking with total scores of Kevin, 32.5 points, and Bob, negative 8.5.
All right, well, we're coming back now, though. Right now.
Hey, that's right. Hey, college football season is over. Eyes of the college sports world turn to college basketball. In the thick of conference play, it's go time.
I'd agree with that.
All right, Bob, so what do you got for this week?
All right, so I got Tennessee, and some of these games are going on right now, so we can get these scores momentarily. Indiana playing Penn State at home. Got a text in from Brandon, who's a follower of the show, saying, and I quote, Hoosiers. And the reason he said that is because Indiana's beating Penn State. Now, Tom, you received my pick earlier in the day. That pick was Indiana over Penn State, seeing IU at +1. And you know what that means, that if, and I don't know what the score is right now, but if that result were to hold, I would get the differential there plus 10 points. Am I correct?
If the score were to hold, yes, I believe your math checks out.
Coming back. Tennessee. I had Tennessee over Vandy, and I saw a Tennessee -2 line today. I think that's either happening or has happened. And then the third one, I want Seton Hall over Marquette. That's the late game starting. It may have even already started. And I saw Seton Hall -1. So I'm taking a chance there on almost a pick 'em that I give away the 10 points, but I think Hall wins that game on the road. I think Seton Hall is a team that has had a very good season. A couple road losses have sort of tripped them up and maybe have sort of cooled some of the enthusiasm about that team. But that team can really play, can really stretch a defense, can drive, kick, shoot, and certainly get some rebounds inside. I really like this Seton Hall team this year, and I think they beat Marquette.
All right. Kevin, what do you got?
All right. So my first pick, I have West Virginia over Baylor at a -10 line for West Virginia. As I know right now, it doesn't seem like that's working out too well. West Virginia is hanging in there. Probably not going to be a big win, but hopefully they get to 10, and maybe I'll get another even slate on that game like last week. Next game I have is Auburn over Ole Miss. Auburn team playing very well. 2 good wins last week over Tennessee and Arkansas. Really impressed with the way they're playing right now. And Ole Miss, very good team also, but I think they can cover that spread by 11. My last game I have is Seton Hall over Georgetown. Now, that's a Saturday game. There's no line out on that one. I don't know what the line
Taking
will be.
a flyer.
But I have a lot of confidence in the way Seton Hall's playing. I don't have a lot of confidence in the way Georgetown's playing. And for some reason, I think that line may be closer than it should be. But that's purely a guess at this point. There's no way to really determine that. But I wanted to keep it interesting so the folks can, listen and think about it all week instead of just watching the games tonight,
You're a giver that way.
Yeah, exactly. What can I say? We here at Bob Long Sports like to keep you interested all week long. So
you're really cheering for Marquette tonight then. Beat Seton Hall, bring the line down for you, and then have Seton Hall start to churn the juices a little bit and say, we got to pick it up, and then hammer Georgetown into the ground.
Absolutely. They just gave Villanova a challenge. Maybe they give Seton Hall a challenge, skew that line a little bit. Maybe people start to think about Georgetown a little more favorably. You never know. But, I'm throwing that out there. I have some points to play with at this point in the season. I have a slight advantage over Bob. Can't stress that enough. And so we'll see how it goes this week.
Enjoy that. Enjoy that lead while it lasts.
Some score updates if you have them. So,
All right.
final, Indiana 74, Penn State 70.
Oh, look at that.
Ooh.
Big.
Okay.
So
All right,
that's
you get
that's
the 10
15 points.
And
15,
that West Virginia game was West Virginia up 2 with 5 minutes to go.
Is that where they're at right
I
now?
think, here, let's
This
let's
is
check.
live.
We have the technology.
Live.
So here we go.
Tied.
Oh, it's tied with
Tied.
4:50 to go.
How about
4:50 to go. Sorry, get a couple points. West Virginia starts fouling. We're in business.
What? Who are you cheering for?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Baylor.
The winning's
Hopefully.
getting his head.
Got
Yes.
it. Got
the
it.
winning's getting in my head. It's okay.
All right.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
So there you go. So that's a fun game that we've been playing all year long. And is there a game that we've picked for the audience here, Kevin?
There is a game that we've picked for the audience.
This is
here.
audience against hosts here.
So, if you don't remember from the last time we did this show, Bob and I will pick the winner of this game, and then you fans will also submit your picks for this game, and we will track the winners, track the record all year long between the three of us. So, the game this week is TCU versus Texas. Texas,
I thought we were-
1-point favorite over TCU.
Oh, really? I thought we were going Nova Xavier first of all. But if that's the case,
Don't ever assume.
Curveball.
yes, you know what that means. I'm going TCU big. Give me TCU big on the road. Love this Jamie Dixon coach team. They had a very tough one against Oklahoma, and I think they've kind of skidded a little. You know what I mean? Just a game like that can affect you a little bit. I think that line's deceiving, and I think they go to Austin and they win big. Horned Frogs.
I'll go with Texas on this one. I'll take the Longhorns. You never know.
Mo Bamba.
Mo Bamba,
Why
baby.
not?
I
what
mean,
I'm
if
going.
I was a betting man, I'd go TCU for sure. I wouldn't want to take Texas with just the -2. If we were playing the Pick'em challenge, I would take TCU for sure.
Right.
However, I'm inclined to take the Longhorns on this one, so I think I'm gonna go.
Let's see it.
You
Hook
never,
'em.
you never know what happens in Austin. You can get them at your home court.
Great city.
Great city.
That's right. Rick Barnes isn't coaching anymore, so maybe they can win this one.
That's what I'm thinking.
Ooh.
You don't like that?
I have no response.
All right. Fair enough.
Hopefully he's not out there watching right now.
Maybe
Sorry,
he
Rick.
is. We'd like to offer him a guest spot anytime. So, lots going on in college basketball, guys. Switching gears slightly, Villanova back to number 1. You see, creatively, we've put that together behind us here. Villanova back to number 1 for the 15th week in the last 3 years, which is obviously unprecedented for any team in Philadelphia. Of course, Villanova included in that. The big losses this week, though, and you take a look at Michigan State losing to Ohio State in the fashion that they did. In the new rankings, you feel like, in many ways, they they reflect a change here, and that for the vast majority of the year, we've seen a lot of the same teams near the top, and they'll continue to be that way. But Villanova losing, just before the new year against Butler, you'd think, all right, that should drop them pretty far down. But everybody else behind them had lost so many times that they only dropped to 3, a couple of losses at the top. Villanova's right back. And even with a theoretical loss against Xavier, I think the Musketeers would take a huge jump, but Villanova, again, would not fall that much because of the amount of teams with 3 and 4 losses in the top, you know what I mean, across college basketball here. So, what were your thoughts on what we saw this week in terms of the new rankings?
Well, I really just think it shows, the parity in college basketball right now. There's so much talent out there on so many teams. Everyone is really deep at this point, and, a lot of good players. And you got to remember that these are 19 to 21-year-old kids. The guy that Michigan State is relying on is Miles Bridges, and he's, a 19, 20-year-old kid. And these aren't professional athletes out there, but you just don't, you never know what you're going to get on a given night. These guys are as close as it comes to professional athletes, but you still never know. Maybe they were up studying late one night for an exam or something like that. These are still kids out here, so you really have to remember that college basketball, more than anything else, really, it's any given night for any team.
Right, and it makes it a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun as a fan, for sure, when you never know any given night. Unranked, ranked team, it doesn't matter. Anybody can beat anybody in this day and age. And then also, it's part of the one-and-done era, when you have teams that are ranked early in the season based on expectations, and young teams who aren't going to perform as well now at this point in the season than they most certainly will come March. So those teams are going to get upset. Lack of experience, like you said, they're 19, 21-year-old kids. It's going to happen, but it is a lot of fun to watch.
And it feels like a year in particular where I think anything can happen. I mean, when I just scan these rankings here and I see, and no disrespect to one of our good listeners, Eric, that loves University of Cincinnati, when I see Cincinnati here at 14-2, sitting at number 14 in the country, there's room for them to escalate, of course. But I think back to a snowy night just a week ago at Temple when it was just an atrocious game from start to finish. And Temple kind of, in some ways gave away many opportunities to win that game. There they sit at 14. I look at Gonzaga having lost 3 games, one of which, of course, was to Villanova. The others to an average San Diego State team, a team that has a few losses that just make you go wide-eyed when you actually see who the teams are that even San Diego State has lost to. Then you pull up a team like, Kansas, it's 12-3 and number 12 in the country. They have that unbelievable streak in the Big 12 still going in terms of regular season championships. Is this the year that West Virginia or somebody else, TCU was in the mix? Oklahoma is clearly still in the mix with maybe the best scorer in all of college basketball in Trae Young. Is this the year that they can go down? And then a team that's just going to lie in the weeds all year long, and I don't know if they have the goods to make a run in the tournament, but a team that I just enjoy watching, inside-out basketball, and the ability to work around the floor, all starts with a guy like Haas. I mean, that's Purdue, a phenomenal team out of the state of Indiana and the Big Ten Conference, and they're number 5 in the country right now at, like I said, 15-2. I love that team. Wichita State is going to be in it, and they're legitimately a contender this year, which, of course, they've been at times in the past. But this is a year I think they can lose 2, 3, 4 games because of the way they've scheduled, and people are still going to respect their ability to compete come March. That's just top of the head. Throw them out there, comments, as I look up and down this top approximately 15. And I didn't even mention TCU sitting out there at number 16 with, one bad loss and then the giveaway to Oklahoma where they're controlled most of the game. Like I said, I think they beat Texas, and I think they beat them soundly. I think that line, I just think the line's wrong, and I like Jamie Dixon's team. We'll just have to see if they're going to be a true top 20, top 15 type of team for the whole year. But they've shown a lot of great promise.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a lot of what the Big 12 is made of this week. A lot of big games coming up right now. Texas Tech playing Oklahoma. That's a very good game. Not sure if we have an update on that game or not. It was pretty close at halftime when we started the show. Number 9, Oklahoma versus number 16, TCU. TCU has had a couple of tests this year. They seem to be for real. Played very well in a couple of good tight games earlier this year. And then this weekend on Saturday, the big one, West Virginia versus Texas Tech. So a lot of things are going to work themselves out. Oklahoma has 2 top 25 games this week. West Virginia does as well. So very difficult schedule coming up in the Big 12, and a lot of teams are going to make their mark this week in the Big 12.
This is the Villanova Basketball Report here on BLS. Bob Long, Tom Trainer, Kevin Long here. The upcoming schedule for Villanova, as everybody else is looking up at them right now. Number 1 in the country. Xavier tomorrow night at the Wells Fargo Center. Then they travel up the New Jersey Turnpike to Madison Square Garden, where they take on the St. John's Red Storm. That game on the 13th at 8 o'clock p.m. Then right back down the Northeast Corridor to take on Georgetown at the Verizon Center. That should be a lot of fun. A 12-4 Hoyas team, which is now starting to be challenged in the Big East Conference. But if they've done adequately in the first portion of the conference play. Then what's going to be a really, really, really fun game. Back up the Northeast Corridor, almost to Boston, where they take on in Storrs, Connecticut, the UConn Huskies in a non-conference matchup. And that is when it comes to history of the Big East, this is a game that a lot of people have been clamoring for, and we will get it. Those are 3 big-time traditional rivals that are all of them in some ways on their way back up after varying levels of troughs. It's going to be a great couple of weeks for Villanova here.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to that UConn game. If for nothing else, just because of the state of Villanova basketball versus UConn basketball and where it is now versus where it was before. Obviously a big rival for Villanova, and UConn had the upper hand for years and years. So it'd be nothing more gratifying to a lot of Villanova fans to see them go up to Storrs, Connecticut and take one from UConn and really kind of take it to them. And then, like you mentioned, St. John's, always a tough battle with them. Sort of a version of street ball up there. It always seems like they're, high energy, running around, especially with, the limited amount of depth that Villanova has right now with, a couple injuries and Dylan Painter redshirting this season. It'll be interesting to see how we keep up with them, but I think Villanova should be okay at the end of the day in that one.
Let's talk a little bit about that depth in Villanova's, when they go 5, 6, 7 deep. Clearly, with Colin Gillespie out, and we don't know if it's for the foreseeable future, very likely may end up in a season-ending type thing, and maybe they try to get that red shirt. That seems to be one direction that they could go. Jermaine Samuels, don't know as much about his return timetable, but obviously that's a step back for him. At this point, you go with your starting 5, and then depending on who's starting, let's just say it's the normal starting 5. Then you go DiVincenzo and Cosby Roundtree. That's pretty much about as deep as you go, 7 deep. We've talked about that a lot on the show before. How much of a hindrance is that? Is that something that's the difference between a national championship and a Sweet 16? Is that the difference between a Big East title and second place in the league in the regular season? What are we talking about here with this depth, if it's an issue at all? Because there's a lot of national championship teams that have gone 7 deep.
Yeah, well, I certainly think it's going to be a hindrance in the Big East tournament. Now, you talk about Colin Gillespie, a guy that they weren't necessarily counting on this guy in September. There were thoughts around Villanova basketball. He's not ready. He's going to redshirt. Just come out and lights the world on fire in the fall, earns himself a spot to, he started in the first scrimmage game, earned himself a spot in the rotation, and then you're counting on him, and then, he goes and breaks his wrist. And then Jermaine Samuels, he's sort of struggling. He has a pretty good game. And then he, same injury in practice. So, certainly doesn't look good for those guys. It looks like Colin is going to redshirt. Jermaine, remains to be seen. He may have already played too many games, so maybe he'll be back around tournament time. But I think you're really going to see the biggest effect in the Big East tournament when you have to play 3-4 games consecutively right in a row in as many days. So it definitely affect their status for the Big East tournament. And also in the NCAA tournament. Not as big of a deal, but, you always get those games. Someone gets in foul trouble. We've seen it with Dante. We've seen it with Eric and now Omari recently. So That's when it's going to come into play if we get into foul trouble in the NCAA tournament and we need somebody to step up.
Right, and it's tough. And one way you look at it, if they are without Samuels and Gillespie for a while, or for the rest of the season, there's still a lot of season left. There's time. There's time to prepare and get the rest of the guys. Cosby Roundtree's really coming around, and get this team, the guys you have now in this 7, 8-ish man rotation. Getting Tim Delaney more minutes. So get those guys involved and really make the best team you can with the guys you have. So there's time to do that. The other thing is there's a lot of time left in the Big East regular season, and guys are going to get worn out. Big East is a tough physical conference to play in every week. Guys are battling it out against really, hard-nosed teams. So it's going to wear on these guys, playing essentially a 7-man bench, and that's tough too. And like you said, the Big East tournament that's going to be hard. Those 3 days in a row, there's really no easy way to go about it. In one sense, it's great they have a lot of time. In one sense, a lot of time can take a lot out of them.
It's a great discussion here tonight. Let's hit the comments here. Of course, we're on Facebook Live as well as on Ustream, and there's so many ways to get in touch with us. Of course, our shows go up on YouTube as well. We have a stream that goes on Periscope on Twitter after the fact. You can watch that straight through to the end, and then always access it through our Twitter handle @BobLongSports. So you can get in touch with us through the Facebook Live, but good thoughts here from a lot of folks. And Dave Buzzard checks in once again saying we need the Nova versus Cuse. We were talking earlier about the old rivalries, and then, of course, we just brought up the UConn rivalry. That's one that Dave would really like to see. And then he also checked in and said TCU agrees with me regarding the TCU-Texas matchup. So I agree, Dave. I like it, and I think Jamie Dixon's team is going to get the upper hand there. Certainly in terms of the Jamie Dixon sweepstakes, the TCU Horned Frogs got the better of the Pitt Panthers, at least in the short term, on that coach, we won't say swap, but Dixon to TCU on his own volition, quote unquote, as he was pushed out the door of the University of Pittsburgh, and then Kevin Stallings, after he was let go from Vanderbilt, coming up to coach Pittsburgh, and still taking his time. He has a very young team at this point, but you just don't sense that enthusiasm around the program as you used to when Jamie Dixon was there, and even when they were in the Big East. Not that I think the conference has as much to do with it as certainly the coach. I got a good thought here or question at least, from Bobby James checking in. Kane's thoughts. Tough to get a read on him. Uber talented team. I mean, absolutely ridiculously talented team. And Lonnie Walker is so much fun to watch. What his future holds, how long they have him there is certainly up for discussion. But this is a Canes team, and Jimmy Larinaga, I mean, my goodness. A guy that did it for so long at George Mason has to come down to Miami and do it a completely different way. You got to love it. I mean, the fact that they've done so well, and obviously Miami was at least named in the preseason discussions and the Adidas issues that have come up. But all that aside, I think he's done, and so much more to come on that. Obviously, no guilt, innocence, etc. Nothing to come forward on that. It's just worth noting. But I really like this Canes team, and I think it's an ACC this year where you've seen Duke drop some games. Clearly, Carolina is not the team that everybody expected them to be right out of the gates. I think they can still win the conference tournament, could even win the conference. A long way to go from a regular season perspective, but it feels to me like this is a wider open ACC than we've seen. Louisville is a different team, obviously, for many different reasons. This is an ACC that I think Miami can win. It's about clicking. It's about getting those athletes on the floor at the same time. Obviously, we like watching the local kid here as well. I really, really do like this Canes program to have a nice year. It's just at times can be consistency.
They also have a big game versus a very improved Clemson team this week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be a lot of fun. Good question here from Anthony. Long term, how do we think Nova matches up against some of the other teams that are in the top 10 right now? And it's a good question because we were just running through that top 10. Villanova, West Virginia, University of Virginia, Michigan State, Purdue, Wichita State, Duke, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, and Xavier. So let's just go through every one of these teams and say, does Villanova win on a neutral floor, yes or no? And then we can get into more specific commentary. All right, West Virginia, do they win on a neutral floor?
Yes.
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 Okay.
What? Go for it.
I mean, just getting back to the discussion of earlier, again, these are the college kids, and to say, like, do they win, do they lose, any given night, honestly, it's hard to say, like, yes, Villanova wins this game every time. Maybe 6 out of 10, sure. Like
Okay,
10
6 out of 10 is the standard. If it's in the
All right.
middle, then you push, all right?
Okay.
41 to 59%, you push.
All right.
All right?
Well, I'll make this easy on you. I like the Cats against any team on that list, save maybe Michigan State. I think I like the Cats' experience. They can score. I think they're going to figure out their defensive issues. Like I said, their defensive issues at this point are just a lot of little wrinkles they need to figure out. Like I said, the effort is not the problem. That's never been the problem with Jay Wright's teams. It's just they need to figure out some switching and transition defense issues.
Okay.
And I think they'll figure that out. So Michigan State, I think, is the team on there with the experience, maybe Wichita State experience-wise,
Gotcha.
to match up with the Cats.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested to see how Oklahoma does at the end of the day this
That's
year.
my team.
Yep.
I think they would beat Villanova right now on a neutral floor.
Extremely impressive this year. Something that we really haven't seen at the college level in a long time. I mean, this guy is playing like
Except
Steph Curry.
for Buddy Hield at his school 2 years ago.
See, even then, even
They're
then,
different players.
They are different
they're
players.
very different players. Buddy Hield wasn't the type of guy to step up from the logo at half court and just drain a three. And we've seen Trae Young do that 3 or 4 times in the past week here. Extremely talented player. I'm very interested to see what he does the rest of the year and beyond.
What
I
about
think he's a
Jimmer
special-
Fredette? Jimmer!
You had to spoil it for me, Bob, didn't you?
I just had to ask. It's our boy.
It's pretty similar. I hope for Trey's sake he ends up more like Steph.
It's pretty similar. Now let's move on. All right, I got you. All right. So Xavier, I mean, that's another team on the list. Do they beat Xavier on a neutral floor?
Yes.
I think they do
Yeah.
too. Do they beat they beat Duke on a neutral floor?
I think so.
That's a tough one.
I mean, if Villanova struggles defensively, if you think Villanova struggles defensively, you haven't seen Duke. I mean,
Yep.
Duke's defensive woes, and that's another coach. I mentioned Jay always had his guys. The effort is always there defensively, and that was always Coach K's MO for the longest time. Was he took these big, hot shot high school stars and brought them in and taught them to play the quote unquote right way, play hard for Duke, for that name on the front of your shirt. But their defense, past few seasons, even the year they won their most recent national championship, was a team that struggled most of the year defensively, and then all of a sudden figured it out when the
Right.
tournament came around.
Yep.
So that's a team that
yeah. And there's a program that has sort of taken after the Kentucky way of getting all these freshmen
Right.
and one and done. But they also have the experience of Grayson Allen this year, which can help the development of those young players even quicker, get them ready to go. Usually those Kentucky teams don't gel until March. So having the experience of Grayson Allen and get that going a little sooner, playing a little better during that March, April time frame. So Duke's definitely another team that scares me.
right. And Grayson Allen was a big catalyst to that Duke national championship team. He really really was his coming out party on the national stage. And sometimes that's all it takes is one guy on a team that's that talented. When you already have Bagley and you already have Allen, and just sometimes it just takes one more piece for a team to really flourish.
Last team, and I think Villanova does beat this team on a neutral floor, and I keep vacillating on these guys. And by the way, you guys know me well enough that when people talk about past performance of a given program or team in the tournament, I just blow them off completely. I try my best to listen and take what everybody says, but when you start talking about the historical struggles of a Villanova basketball program, for example, going back to when we're having this discussion, say in 2016, right before they went and had the greatest tournament run of all time, I say it's absolutely ridiculous because of what you said in the beginning. It's 18 to 22-year-old kids. And, oh, by the way, they turn over every 4 years. So when I say this about Purdue, keep in mind that I don't think it necessarily matters all that much. They have struggled at times in the tournament. I think this team is really good. It's going to be a 1 or a 2 seed. I think they have a good shot to win the Big Ten in the regular season. And I just love the way Matt Painter's teams play. The only issue is there are teams out there that are more athletic. I don't know if there's many teams that play better offensive styles and more together from an efficiency standpoint than them. But I really do like this Purdue team to be really solid, consistent all year, and give themselves to make a deep run, a good chance to make a deep run. Right now, I think Villanova would beat them on a neutral floor, but that's another team in the top 10 that I really like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Villanova would take them on a neutral floor right now. Good team. I agree with you. I don't necessarily agree with this team can't play the tournament and all that type of thing. Obviously Villanova proved that not to be true in 2016. Looked for them to make a deep run this year for sure.
All right, last one here from Dave Buzzard. Thoughts on the NFL games this weekend? This is a great way to end it here as we transition slightly to talk about, of course, what everybody has their eyes on, the divisional playoff games. New England Patriots, first of all, obviously another great year for them, but there's some news coming out about this team, about how Belichick and how Brady and how Kraft may or may not have some differences of opinion. Seth Wickersham came out with what appeared to me to be a pretty hard-hitting article, and he had sourced things, but in today's day and age, it's anonymous sources, so to some people it doesn't matter. People have their opinions about what ESPN thinks of the Patriots and that there's some sort of agenda against them. I don't know that I buy that. And they come out this weekend with all that in mind, all that baggage. They haven't seen, this all came in between their last regular season game and now. They play a Tennessee team that is riding all the momentum in the world, played a great 2 quarters, 2 of the best quarters that you've seen in a while from a playoff perspective, coming all the way back against the Chiefs and beating Andy Reid and co. Marcus Mariota has been up and down this year, but I personally think that he's a phenomenal quarterback with a great future in the NFL who's really got to come back from that injury, and I hope that he can be more consistent because I think he's a franchise-type guy long term. What do you think, though, when he shot Tennessee pulls the upset?
I really don't see it. I mean, this story has been very surprising to me, at least, and I think the rest of the nation really. Here's 3 guys who've been together for almost 20 years now, and this is really the first blip on the radar, in an otherwise hugely successful relationship. I think they'll overcome this. I don't think it'll be too big of an issue for them. Tennessee, 2 good games down the stretch here. They beat the Jags and beat the Chiefs last week. But, I don't see the Patriots giving this one up in Foxborough.
Yeah, I think the Patriots win. I don't read too much into the story. And as for ESPN or other media outlets having an agenda against the Patriots, I think that maybe all it is those media outlets know that everybody else has an agenda against the Patriots, because that's what happens when you're always the team to beat. There's always going to be scrutiny. Everybody, wants to knock you down somehow. So
more page views, more advertisers.
Exactly. I don't read too much into it. I think same old Patriots. I think they take care of business.
All right, AFC, the other game, Steelers, Jags. Unfortunately, the Jags crushed their hope and dreams last weekend in Jacksonville. Kevin and I were down there. Great experience for sure. Great
Awesome.
Turnout by the Buffalo Bills. Lot X was apparently an amazing, amazing experience.
Apparently.
We didn't get there because we were told that it was a 2-hour wait to get into the stadium. That wasn't the case. It was much worse at the Ralph. But we were in on time, which is the most important thing.
I wonder if that lot was always Lot X or if it was like a play on Project X. I don't know. It could have been something related to that. But it sounded like Bills fans were having a lot of fun over there for sure.
Yes, jumping off campers
way,
through
yes.
tables.
Yeah, either
Lighting
way, Lot X
themselves
sounds
on fire.
appropriate.
Yeah.
So I like the
Absolutely.
Steelers, though, by the way. I like the Steelers in this one. I think they go chalk.
Yeah.
Jags just aren't
agree.
playing well. I mean, Blake Bortles was just I haven't seen many performances like that. That was terrible. That was an atrocious display of quarterbacking. And frankly, that they were lucky to get out of there with a win.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember at least 4 screen passes that Blake Bortles missed his guy on. I mean, that was something special. I mean,
I haven't seen that since Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I mean, if only they had a little better backup to come in and save the day, maybe they'd have a chance against Pittsburgh. But here's a guy with close to no mobility, and he beats the Bills with his legs. He
and Leonard Fournette.
Yeah. I mean, the Bills really had Leonard Fournette's number the entire game. They were stopping him every chance. Some poor offensive play calling on the Bills' part, and then letting Blake Bortles scramble out of the pocket. Maybe throwing a QB spy here and there, maybe stop him once in a while. He's not going to beat you with his arm, so maybe you make Blake Bortles beat you with his leg. So you gotta be ready for that and stop that. But I think this one will be a rout. I don't see Ben Roethlisberger throwing 5 picks again.
I agree. I'm going Steelers and looking forward to hopefully a matchup from that controversial finish between the Steelers and Patriots earlier in the season.
All right, so looks like we all got that game. I have the Patriots over the Steelers. I think they go back to the Super Bowl, and I think that it'll just be tough for the Steelers to go to Foxborough. Could be a good game, but I like the Patriots to go back to the Super Bowl, and as we'll get to the NFC, perhaps a premonition of what I have coming out of the NFC as well.
Yeah, I like the Patriots in that rematch again.
All right, to the NFC, Eagles, Falcons. I like the Falcons, guys. I really do. And I'll give it away. I just gave it away. Listen, I got a rematch, guys. I got the Falcons beating the Eagles and then winning the NFC Championship game and going back to the Super Bowl. I talked about this with you, Kevin, off air, that I had the Falcons winning this game, and I really like this team. I mean, I just think they're a great offensive team that, for one reason or another, haven't always clicked, but they're still just about that same team from last year. Really, really good. Same team that had a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. I like them to go back.
Yep, absolutely. I agree 100%. It's a shame for Eagles fans. This is really a promising year with a really promising quarterback and, all the potential in the world to win the Super Bowl this year. And this, I would have loved to see this game with Carson Wentz. Man, this would have been fun. Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz going back and forth. 2 really good teams on both sides of the ball. I just don't think that Nick Foles can take this team past this round, especially with Matt Ryan and his experience and the rest of this team's experience in the playoffs.
All right. Well, I'll be optimistic. I agree that I was worried when you see that the Eagles have gotten the Falcons, a team that I think is getting hot, a team that I think is looking for vengeance from last year. But I'm a believer that defense wins championships. That the Eagles' defense has been really good most of the season, and I hope and would expect that the bye week gives the offense and Nick Foles time to work out some kinks, and I would hope that and expect to see the Eagles and Nick Foles' offense from Week 15 against the Giants instead of the last 2 weekends of the season, and I'll take the Birds.
Okay, so there you go. So
which bird?
I'll take the Birds, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay, just had to clarify.
The Philadelphia Birds.
Yes.
Gosh darn it. So in the other game, we have the Saints traveling up north to the the roof domed-in stadium of Minnesota. But I do like the Saints in this one as well. Just don't believe in Keenum whatsoever.
Short and sweet. I like it. I have to agree with you. I mean, you look at Drew Brees versus Case Keenum.
We may or may not disagree at some point.
Yeah, hopefully we will. But I can't say that I disagree here. Minnesota, maybe one of the most well-rounded teams in all of the NFL. But, still Case Keenum, you can't forget what he did in L.A. and in Houston, things like that. He's not – I mean, he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. I will give him that. But he's not, that playoff championship caliber that Drew Brees is. The Saints are just an amazing offense. Alvin Kamara coming out of nowhere this year. I guess maybe not coming out of nowhere, but for most people, Mark Ingram has really had a special year as well. That defense has really come out of nowhere. I like the Saints over the Vikings.
You two both sound pretty confident with the Saints. I think this game's much more of a toss-up. I will go more with what I hope to happen than what I think will happen. I hope that the Vikings pulled out because I just think that the Vikings fans have been talking a lot of trash, and it would be great that if the Eagles could pull it out this weekend and somehow get to that game, the NFC Championship game with the Vikings coming into town with a chance. I think that'd be a lot of fun, especially because I think even when the Eagles had Carson Wentz, the Vikings fans seem to be talking all year about who was the best team in the NFC. So it'd be great if we got that matchup. Of course, you guys don't think either of those teams will be making the NFC East Championship, but I'd love to see that matchup. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
So when that matchup comes, then, Tom, does Minnesota get to go play at home in the Super Bowl? Do they go home, road, home, or do they go home and the Eagles go to Minnesota?
I like the Vikings defense. I really like the Vikings defense. I think that's a game the Eagles would really struggle in. I think in that game I actually might have to pick against the Birds, and I think it'd be really interesting. And I don't know when if ever, or when this would, if it's happened. When
I
the
don't
last
know
time
that
would
it
have
has.
happened. Yeah, where you'd have a team playing in its own stadium.
Okay.
So I guess that leaves me with the Saints and Falcons. I'm going to take the Saints in that one. I just really like the team. Maybe I'm partial to when they completely manhandled the Buffalo Bills, I believe week 10, something around there.
It was 1 week before they got manhandled by the Chargers.
Yes. Shout out Nate Peterman. We always believed in you. I just like the Saints a lot this year. I think they're a really special team, really special offense, much improved defense. Cameron Jordan's been amazing for them. Marshawn Lattimore, great draft pick for them. He's done really well. I like the Saints to advance to the Super Bowl.
Falcons over Patriots. They get their revenge. The 6th seed beats the Patriots in what should be a phenomenal redemption game. Matt Ryan gets his Super Bowl title. They do get the pass rush for 4 quarters, and they beat them.
I am going to go with the Pats over the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I think the Patriots beat whoever they play.
And that's that.
That's a downer.
It's unfortunate that's the way it is, but that's how it's going to be.
Birds win. Falcons. I'm the only one.
Notice he just said birds, not
that's just-
the.
I mean, people call Eagles birds.
Yeah, I know. That's why I did
They
it.
do.
I
Gotcha.
know. I hear
All
you.
right.
I hear you.
All right. So we got 2 Pats, Super Bowl champs, and 1 Falcons.
Falcons. I like it. Great stuff, folks. All night long. Certainly enjoyed the show. Appreciate everybody tuning in and commenting on Facebook Live. These broadcasts are always available after the fact on Facebook Live and on Periscope, which is the Twitter affiliate. That's on our handle at BobLongSports. You can obviously catch these broadcasts on the Ustream app as well, as you've always been able to catch our broadcast. Next up for us here on BLS is a Friday night tilt, a big one in the Philadelphia Catholic League, as Archbishop Carroll, the Patriots, the Pats, they come to Winmore to take on LaSalle. They're one of the top teams in 5A. LaSalle, a top 7 or 8 team, depending upon which rankings you check, in 6A, and it starts just a huge gauntlet for this team where they play Carroll. Then they have a road game at O'Hara. Then the big boys continue to come into town, though. Archbishop Wood that next Friday. Newman Goretti at home that next Monday. And then a rescheduled game against Bonner Prendergast, who might just be the best team of the bunch, that following Wednesday. So in about, we'll say, a week and a half, LaSalle's going to play 4 of the best teams in all of the state of Pennsylvania. And we'll have all those games on BLS. We'll be back here next Tuesday. That's our expectation for our next Villanova Basketball Report. And for Kevin Long, for Tom Trainer, I'm Bob Long saying so long once again from Philadelphia. Enjoy the game tomorrow night at the Wells Fargo Center as the Wildcats of Villanova take on the Musketeers of Xavier. Talk to you later.